What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Liron's Art and Creativity Show. I'm really thankful for you listening to me. Thank you so much. Today we're going to talk about preparation and patience. And this is something I think I had a few insights regarding this topic in the last few months, and so I want to share some of those and talk about these two ideas and what I came to realize recently. And so first off, let's talk a bit about me. I'm not a patient person at all. With my creation, it's really something that I think is visible from the outside. I started realizing this actually quite some time into my artistic journey. But the moment when I really realized this is something I want to work on was when I really started recording myself painting. And while I was working, I didn't feel like I'm in a hurry or something like this, but then when I looked back at the video, I saw a huge difference between, let's say, other artists, and I figured that I could definitely work on some of my patience. Now, this is in terms of that. Even when I used to do pen sketching, I would work really fast. It's something that I enjoy doing, and I think it's great to embrace your natural strengths and things you like, but I do think it needs to come in the context of your greater creation, and if it's something that you really enjoy doing or you prefer to actually work on and improve at. And this was one of those things. Okay, now, in addition to that, I think it manifested itself also in the way I prepared for my paintings, because you can define it as laziness, but I wasn't really doing any preparation for my sketches and later on for my paintings as well. And this is one thing. Maybe it's a manifestation of impatience. Maybe it's just, that need or want to jump straight in and just start doing. Maybe this is why I love pen sketching so much, because it's not slowly building things up with pencil. I think this is also why I like watercolor. It's pretty quick, it's pretty direct. But in any case, I wasn't doing any preparation for my paintings. Now, in the last few months, I think in the last 5 months, I started really preparing for paintings in terms of the color composition and maybe some value studies. And this already gave me a much better starting point. It actually allowed me to understand the value dispersion along the painting, and then sorry about that. When I used to do these preparatory sketches, I would realize, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting this, but I have a focal point here, because I would notice a contrast I haven't thought about. Or I would realize, these two areas completely compete with each other, and it actually ruins the focus of the painting. And so I would just come to realize so many things. And then with color combinations as well, I would suddenly notice that 2 colors or 3 colors I was going to use together aren't working as great or as well as I was hoping for. This just gave me a new level of abilities, and just thanks to preparation, without improving my actual skills. Now, here's where I really came to I think a major understanding, and that is, I talked about values right now and color scheme, color selection, but then I started doing this in terms of composition, and this is something really new. And if you're following me on YouTube, you notice that I talked about it quite a lot in the last, not a lot, but a few times in the last few months. I suddenly realized that my composition sucks. This is like the only way I can say it. I just didn't know how to compose, and I still don't know many times how to compose an interesting scene, how to make things work in terms of the arrangement. Forget about the colors, the paint, the values even. It's more about the arrangement of the different elements and how do I build them in an interesting way. And then I started reading Drawing Scenery by Jack Ham. I talked about this book in the podcast and on my YouTube channel as well. An excellent book that talks about composition. The reason why it dives so deep into composition is because it talks about landscapes and scenes and cityscapes. And when you're doing, not cityscapes, but seascapes and landscapes. When you're doing these things, you really have to decide on what you're going to leave in, what you're going to take out of the scene. The arrangement and composition are so important. So this is something I've been really putting a lot of emphasis in, especially in the last maybe month or two. and I'm finally seeing the difference. And just a quick funny realization I had was, how did I notice the difference and my improvement? Just by looking at my older paintings. And when I say older, I don't mean like a year ago. I mean 3 months ago. So I started looking at some of the paintings I did 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago, even 2.5 months ago. So, because I paint a lot, so I have a lot of material. So 2.5 is a significant difference from 2. So in any case, I started seeing it. It was so obvious that I wasn't arranging things properly, and I just wasn't really paying a lot of attention. And so even if the colors looked great and the values were on and everything looked great, it just looked awkward. Like it's as if you take a really, really good painting and then crop out some part of it, like randomly. So this part could be interesting. It could be arranged in a not such an interesting way, because you just kind of cropped a part of the scene, and it just wasn't working as well. So now what I notice is, in the last few weeks, mainly like the last month or two, it really looks so much better. And this is what I want to put an emphasis on in this episode, is that if you don't get the results you want and you're impatient, then that's something to look into, because this is the one thing you can correct just by sheer force, or like willpower. You don't need to improve any skills. You just have to kind of focus a little more and use your willpower to be more patient. And so if you feel like you're stuck at some level, maybe planning and working more slowly will actually take you to the next level. And I think that's a great deal, because a lot of the things that improve us just require so much work and experience. And, you just have to paint constantly and draw constantly and sketch constantly. But this is the one thing I can say is a quick fix, because you can immediately flip a switch in your brain and decide, I'm going to work slower. I'm going to focus harder on what I'm doing. Okay, and so it's kind of like a quick fix, I would say. So this is the main thing I wanted to talk about, and I just wanted to discuss a few other things that I found that help. So first off, I found that slowing down deliberately as I work is really helpful. Now, how did I know how much to slow down? Because you may feel like you're working at a normal pace, but then again, if you would work more, let's say, slowly, you will have a better result. So how do you know? Well, my answer to that, I derive it from a video I did, actually, and I talked about extremes. And I said that if you feel like you need to improve something, try an extreme. So, for example, if I feel like I need to work slower, then I would try an extreme of slowing down my work to the point of feeling uncomfortable, meaning really extremely. If I feel like in the past I felt like I'm neutralizing my colors too much, I'm over mixing, so my entire painting is just boring gray. So what I did was explore another, the other extreme of putting everything in its purest form. So if I want to do greens, I'll just put yellows and blues separately on paper. And what this does is you explore another extreme, and that's the only way to find your balance. And it is true with many different examples. Let me give you another example from my own personal life. So I felt like I was being too much of a hermit when working. So I've been working really hard for the past year, and I found out that I feel like lonely in the middle of the week. Now, I have a lot of friends and I have a lot of people I can meet up with, but I just am so focused at times on work that I don't allow enough time for that. So what I had to do was to look for the other extreme of, okay, let's just say yes to everything and initiate things myself. So I just started texting my friend more. Instead of just disappearing for an entire day or two, I would make sure I text them every day. And then I would anytime someone offered something, I was like, yes, let's do this. Yes. And I explored another extreme. And so for a week or so, I wasted, quote unquote, a lot of time, because I just spent it with friends and I spent less time on working. But I was able to find a better balance later on and add it up. And let me reiterate why I think this is so important to explore an extreme. Many times we are stuck in a pattern that makes us do something one way. For example, me with overmixing, or me with working very fast. Now, in order to kind of kick ourselves out of this pattern, an incremental change isn't enough. Because what happened to me at least, was I started working a little slower, but it was just incrementally slower. And then I would always default back to faster. Okay, because it wasn't big enough of a difference, and I would just forget and go back to my habits. But to really kind of shock my system, I had to go to the other extreme and really work so slowly, to the point of worrying that the paint will dry and the wash won't be even, and like I had to slow down significantly. Okay, so one thing that can work for, let me zoom back out, and because we went on a bit of a tangent, one thing that can work to develop that patience is to slow down deliberately. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, we talked about preparation, we talked about preparing for a painting. Now let's talk about taking breaks. This is something it was really hard for me for some reason. I felt for the longest time, for the first year in watercolor, that I have to finish a painting in one sitting, which doesn't make sense because a lot of people don't work that way. They start a painting, they work for a few hours or an hour or whatever, and then they take a break. And the thing with taking breaks is that it helps with so many things. So first off, now, of course, unless you're on a deadline or tight schedule, it's a bit of a problem. But if you have time, then taking a break can work on your patience and improve it. It can also show you your work in a new light, which is a huge benefit, because sometimes, even if you feel, especially if you feel stuck or you're unsure where to go, taking a break can really help. And I put that under the category of being more patient and taking your time. Okay, so really realize you don't have to finish your work in one sitting, because I was really stuck on that idea. And now I did several works in the past few months that I actually took a break from for a few hours, or for even just a few minutes, or maybe like 30 minutes, or just walking around and meditating and then going back to it. And even I took a few breaks of maybe even a week or 2 weeks between sessions, and that really gave me some different perspective. So what I can definitely report now is that my results are much better, and the main insight or realization I had in the last 2 months was the composition aspect. This was a huge deal for me. Just allowing myself a few minutes before I start to paint to plan things out, to not just put my pencil to paper and draw, but actually take my time and think about where I'm going to put every element, and see how it will create an interesting composition. Maybe make a few preparatory sketches as well, which I still don't do that often, but and maybe even doing a value study, or just playing around with the colors, the paints. I have a few videos on that, on how to prepare and improve your watercolor paintings. And so this is really something that I find to be a huge help. And again, it's like a magic solution, because you don't have to actually improve a skill, you just have to be in that mindset. Okay, so I really recommend you try it out. And this is basically everything I wanted to share with you in today's episode. Let's move on to the Artist's Corner, and today I want to share with you just a crazy, amazing artist that I found on Instagram, because I do find from time to time artists there that are just phenomenal. So her name is Anna Mayorova, and she's, I believe, a Russian watercolor artist. There isn't a lot of information about her, but definitely you can, I'll put a link to her Instagram and everything, so you can check out her work, and maybe even a website. She does have a YouTube channel, but only 2 videos, like 700 subscribers, which is not bad, but only 2 videos. I will probably link that up as well. She does realistic paintings of people, portraits as well as figures, so some more close-ups on the face and like classic portraits, but also just a few people together. And her work is amazing, and what I like so much about it is that first off, it just looks really good, and there's a great sense of light. But the other thing is that it's actually loyal to the more traditional watercolor look. So she doesn't seem to use a lot of, white pigment. And of course, if that's your thing, it's totally fine. I personally really love the traditional watercolor look. So lots of glazing and taking your time and the transparency and using purely watercolor and all of that, reserving the highlights. So and not too much opaqueness, I guess. And she actually does that. So I definitely recommend you check out her work. I'll put a link in the show notes. Okay, so for the show notes of this episode, just go to my website, Liron, that's LIRONYAN, as always, .com/EP12. So that's short for episode 12, okay, as always. So definitely check this out. I will try and make sure I put there the link to Jack Ham's book that I mentioned earlier, as well as there's one thing I mentioned right now as well. I don't remember, but I'll make sure to edit later on as well. So links to everything will be there. Thank you so much for listening. Really, really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will talk to you again real soon.